Oh
Yeah,
yeah. For
I think
everyone who
so too.
participated in
Yeah,
globalization, it would have been like they and they alone had
right.
won World War II.
Yeah.
They had access to a world full of resources and markets in a way that only the Brits could have even dreamed of doing for the previous 300 years. And now it was available for everybody. So the only countries that, for whatever reason, didn't like that system were the countries that wanted all of the benefits and none of the cost. So countries that sided against the United States in the Cold War. I mean, I don't want to
Yeah.
suggest for a heartbeat that we did this because we were nice.
Yeah.
We found a
It's a
way to
it's a business
stave
deal.
off
Yeah.
nuclear war
Right.
and get a bunch of allies to side with us, even in the worst case scenario. That's why we did it. The
Hmm.
fact that it made the whole world wealthy
Yeah.
was a happy side effect from our point of view. From
Hmm.
everyone else's point of view, that was the reason to join.
Yeah. Yeah.
Playing historical what ifs is kind of a fun thing. It's
Sure.
always guesswork, but
Yeah.
World War II probably wouldn't have ended. It would have just continued on with the part of or with the Allies then splitting apart with the Soviets on one side and the West on the other. And keep
Hmm.
in mind that in the dying days of World War II, we dropped a couple A bombs. So I think you
Yep.
have an idea of what that field of competition might have looked like. Sure. So since this is an investment show, I think the best way to do is to talk about a chapter that you haven't made it to yet.
Okay.
There's an industrial commodities chapter. So anything that goes into anything that's not energy and food. The Industrial Revolution did more than just introduce us to what we now consider to be electricity in manufacturing. It also took the lessons of the Renaissance and applied them at scale, first through the Germans and the Brits, and then eventually for the rest of the world. And we figured out all these components and elements that make up our world, and we figured out how to purify them and then recombine them in ways we found useful. What we have missed in the discussion of modern globalization and economic integration is their role. Because the very core of globalization is anyone can go anywhere to get anything. And when we talk about the breakdown of supply chains, we're thinking of semiconductors and tires and widgets, and that's true, but that's not the whole story. We're entering into a world where the raw commodity access that then goes into the process material, that then goes into the intermediate products, that goes into the finished products, that very base first step, that is no longer guaranteed. So we can look forward to large portions of the world losing access to the inputs that are necessary to attempt a modern lifestyle. And if you want to
Wow.
talk about the sexiest of all of them, silicon,
Hmm.
not for panels, silicon for semiconductors,
Hmm.
because 95% of it comes from one mine in North Carolina.
Wow.
So it's one thing to control global food or global energy.
Yeah.
It's another thing when you can control the only input that allows digitization to even theoretically happen. And the United States is going to have to figure out what to do that with that over the next decade.
Oh,
We're
I get it.
entering into a world where there's not enough energy and there's not enough food,
Right.
and where we're going to prioritize our own manufacturing. These are all strategic choices that we're going to make either by choice or failure to make one. When you get to semiconductors, though, when it's all coming from one place,
Hmm.
that's an entirely other level. Because if you can't get enough energy, yes, your car stops. Yes, the lights go
Right.
out. This is bad. But if you can't get any microchips, you can't even pretend to catch up in any sector at all.
Yeah.
The Russians have a very different definition for what modern quality of life means.
Hmm.
That is one of their biggest negatives. That's one of their biggest strengths. It all depends upon how you're measuring it and what it is they're trying to do at the time.
Yeah.
Well,
Information.
I'm not a CFA, so let me just start with that.
It's okay.
Um,
Neither am I.
let me rephrase that. Investing is not my world. I
Yeah.
can tell you, though, that we are looking at chronic shortages in a lot of base materials that make up our world, not just the industrial commodities I just kind of went through,
Hmm.
but food. The world's top wheat exporter has invaded the world's number 4 wheat exporter, and the world's top wheat exporter also is the world's largest exporter of fertilizer and the components necessary so people can make their own fertilizer.
Yeah.
So we're in the early ages of a multi-year shortage in all things agricultural. Um, Russia's also a big player in the aluminum market, or it was, not
Yeah.
anymore. They also are big in copper. That hasn't gone to zero yet. It's on its way down. Platinum group materials, for example, especially palladium, which does double time with silicon and semiconductors. The problem as you're looking at all of these, however, is that sourcing is critical. One of the biggest disservices, in my opinion, that the financial sector has done for us all over the last 20 years is become used to this environment where capital is flush and liquid and we can invest in everything and we don't have to be all that discerning.
Right.
Because if the money is free, why the hell not?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the money's not free anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
so the financial sector has to actually provide value add. In the old system, the entire developing world was in one exchange traded fund. That's asinine to think that India and Brazil and China and Russia have anything in common aside from size. Their markets are completely different. The sectors they play in are completely different. Investing in them is completely different. And yet there they are all together. Same with frontier markets, which makes even less sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like what in the world do Argentina and Vietnam have in common?
Yeah.
Nothing. We have to disaggregate all that now.
Okay.
And that goes not just for the markets in general, but for the specific products. So, for example, if you want to invest in agricultural processing, that seems like a big business right now. It's probably going to get bigger. But all the major agricultural processes that operate in the economies that are not getting hit by these shortages, think France, Canada, Australia, the United States, they're also in Russia and Ukraine. So you really have to do your homework to carve out the parts of the world from your investment choices that just aren't playing anymore. And that means you have to remove companies that have been household names. I'm thinking just Bunge here to pick one out of the air. That is not inappropriate if you want to take advantage of this boom we're going to see in demand for those products in an era of scarcity. That's messy because a lot of them are closer to home. Overall, I think that's a great idea, but you have to be really, really careful of what the sourcing is and where the companies that are producing that material are selling into. So, for example, if you're selling into the United States, particularly in the Mountain West, the Southwest, or the South, that is where the boom in the United States is going to be in residential real estate for at least the next 15 years. People are moving there because it's warmer. That's the boomers. People are moving there because it's cheaper. That's the millennials having families. And nobody wants to be on a metro where they might get COVID again. Yep. So, everyone's moving into that kind of arc. That's, as a rule, not how we decide where we get the stuff that goes into it. You either have local companies that are not publicly traded, or you have international ones that are like bringing in wood from Canada. And untangling that mess requires a brain that's bigger than mine. For the United States, for at least the next 5 years, strongly inflationary. If we make some policy mistakes, it could be stagflationary. But I think a more likely outcome is high growth, high inflation. So think about something that's a little bit more reminiscent of the 60s and the early 70s than the late 70s. We need to double the size of the industrial plant. We need at least 4 million new homes. We're a magnet for migrants, skilled and unskilled. We're dealing with a massive retooling of the existing industrial base, all at the same time that we're having the Ukraine war. So avoiding inflation is impossible. Avoiding high inflation is probably impossible, but at least we're going to have the growth to go along with it.
Yeah. Very interesting, Peter.